Typically, if you're using the CSV import in conjunction with an integration, if you haven't mapped all of the fields on the integration side first, because the integration is automatic in a lot of instances, if you haven't updated those fields or mapped those specific fields, when you're adding them via the CSV, the integration is then updating it based on the mapped options that you have there. So if you're missing pieces, it's going to erase the previous information. If you're just using CSVs, if you're adding in multiple instances, for example, you have your country column, for example. You add in the first one, you have all of the relevant data. If you add a new one and the information isn't on that new file, it can then be erased. It will always update based on the information on the newest CSV. So you want to make sure that all of your columns are completely filled in every single instance. If you're unaware that leaving a column empty or leaving it exempt entirely from a later import, that will in fact delete information from reply, which can cause inactive contacts and things like that. So just make sure that all of the relevant information is in every CSV that you're importing, and don't just pick and choose the specific columns.
Yeah, and Josh, I like that you touched on inactive contacts, because that is a question that we get a lot. You know, if you are looking at your campaign dashboard, so you're seeing a listing of all your campaigns, if you see one that is not active, so it's got like that red dot by the toggle, if you hover over that error message, it will tell you why your campaign is not sending. And when I would say 95% of the time, the reason is due to inactive contacts. The error message is not really, it doesn't really have a lot of detail there, but what inactive contacts means is that, you know, there are contacts in a specific sequence that are missing variables that are being used in the sequence. So for example, if you have a step in your sequence that is using a company variable, there may be some prospects that have been uploaded that don't have that company variable in their prospect profile. So if you just go to their prospect profile, you can either update them individually, or you can re-upload a CSV with that new information. And like Josh was saying, it will update those current contacts and the campaign should resume for those prospects.
Correct. So again, just to add a little bit more clarity and a little bit of a visual here. So when you're importing the CSVs, you have the option to add in as many fields and columns as you'd like. The names don't actually have to correspond exactly to the different fields we have in reply. You will choose the mappings at a later stage of that process. But the point is, using the company again as the example, if I have the first CSV and I have reply in here as the company, that will update tester here to have reply as the company field. If I then have tester in a different CSV later on, whether it be on purpose or by accident, and I don't have reply company in that column, it will update and make this blank later on. So again, just need to make sure that all of the relevant information is on all of your CSVs, unless that particular piece of information is no longer relevant for the sequence that you're moving these people to. So yeah, just needs to be as kind of comprehensive as possible, as often as possible.
All right. So we have another question. It says, if I have a 1,000 contact limit, am I able to remove contacts and add new ones in? So if you're talking about account storage and how many contacts you're allowed to store as people in your account, the limit for each account is actually 100,000 prospects. If you're talking about campaigns, the 1,000 contact limit, so it's a monthly unique contact limit. So essentially what that means is that you can send 1,000 first step emails, and follow-ups are unlimited. If you meet that 1,000 contact threshold within that monthly billing cycle or before that renews, unfortunately, you would have to wait till that next billing cycle starts again. So if your plan renews on the 15th of the month, you would have to wait till the 15th of the month to begin those next unique contact limit, but the follow-ups are unlimited.
Yes, correct. There's no carryover. So for instance, if you only send like 500 this month, you won't get an additional 500 next month. So it's just going to kind of be a complete wipe every 30 days based on the day that you purchase the subscription.
What's the maximum number of connection requests that can be sent daily, weekly, monthly? What about messages? So this is specific to LinkedIn within the sequences.
So that one's a little bit more nuanced. Within reply, there is no actual limit. That is entirely predicated on LinkedIn. And we unfortunately don't have the exact numbers there. We have seen just from people using our Chrome extension for pulling in leads from LinkedIn, the limit is roughly like 100 per day or so. But even then, it can get finicky depending on the type of plan that you're on, previous kind of history with how you've interacted with LinkedIn. So I would skew more towards lower numbers if you're not sure, because there are instances where if you go over API limits on the LinkedIn side, they can temporarily block you. It's not going to be a huge thing like a Google domain issue or anything like that. They'll just prevent you from sending connection requests for like 24 hours or something. So not the biggest deal in the world, but still a little annoying. Yeah.
And I think when it comes to LinkedIn steps in a sequence, and Josh and I have talked about this before. We really talked about this on our last session where we talked about content best practices for email and LinkedIn steps. For LinkedIn steps, we usually recommend that you save the LinkedIn steps for a very hyper targeted, tailored sequence. So meaning, if you have a group of maybe 50 prospects that you're reaching out to, that you really want to personalize those email and hyper focus there, that you utilize the LinkedIn steps there, as opposed to, a campaign where maybe you have 1,000 people and you're trying to execute those LinkedIn tasks for 1,000 people. By saving it for a hyper focused campaign, you're not really going to run the risk of running into those limits that Josh just talked about. But another thing is, because our LinkedIn steps are currently semi-automated, utilizing that in a higher volume campaign can take a lot of time, and it could be a bit tedious executing those tasks. So in terms of limits, recommend always stick with a hyper-focused campaign for those LinkedIn steps.
Yeah, in general, as a rule of thumb, the kind of spray and pray generalized approach, while it can work, you have to really operate at much higher volumes to see a good ROI in those cases. The more kind of direct and specific you can make your sequences, you're always going to find better results that way. It does consume a lot more time, especially in the early stages, getting everything set up. But again, the return on investment is going to be that much more impactful than if you were to just kind of generate a gigantic random list and kind of hope that it's relevant.
All right, so we have another question from Bob. Hi, Bob. When I set a daily email volumes, do I set it at an email level or at a sequence level? So this is actually a question that we get a lot of times, because there are limits, account limits, but there are also sequence specific limits.
So I'm on the page right now. You actually want to use them in tandem. The email account limit is going to take precedence, as if you have an email address connected to multiple sequences, it will stop at whatever limit the email address is set to. This, for instance, 300 here is the limit specifically for the hope you're having a great day sequence I've set up. But if my limit for my email address is only set to, for example, 50, it will not force out 300. It will stop at 50. So whichever number of the two is lower, that's usually the one it will stop at. And in the instance where if you have the same email address connected to, for example, 3 different sequences, you would want to set each of the sequence limits lower to make sure you're divvying out the emails, the total number of emails from your email address appropriately. And you would find those in the settings tab within the sequence. You can go down to general settings and you can adjust the number here. And then this number on the side is related to your actual email address limit, which is in the top here. You go to email accounts, and then you can click in to the particular address you want to mess around with. That little option that I had on the screen for a moment, let me bring it back up. You can see both of the email addresses here. That is because I have connected both of the email addresses that I have in my reply login to the same sequence. So it's going to operate in a round robin style. In that case, I would probably want to set this number to 600 so I could maximize both of the email addresses if that was my goal. So you want to kind of use them together to get the exact numbers that you're looking for. But again, lower number takes precedence. And if they're the same, the email address number is going to be the most important.
Yeah. And Josh, can you hop into email the settings right there to go to email account settings?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So this limit right here, I always recommend especially if you're concerned about like warming up your email accounts or kind of maintaining the reputation or health of your email or domain, I would pay more attention to these limits right here, because like Josh was saying before, if you have, one email address associated with 5 different campaigns, this 200 limit is going to be effective for across all of those campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where it's going to kind of stop. So like I said, if you're concerned about warming up your email account or reputation health, I would really focus on this safety setting right here.
Exactly. And I guess while we're on the topic, we have gone over this much more in depth on our email warm-up call and some of our more startup centric calls. But you do want to start at a lower number, especially in instances where you're using a newer domain or you haven't used your email address for mass mailer purposes in the past. The recommendation is usually around like 15 to 50, depending on the level of activity. But you always want to start at around that range and then build your way up every couple of days or so until you're at the number that you're most comfortable with. Jumping from 0 to 200 plus is almost surefire way to get yourself blacklisted and run into spam issues. So yeah, slow and steady does win the race in this case.
Okay, so we have a question from Antonio. Can you white label your services? We have 10 to 15 clients. We're thinking of using this for replacing our current provider. At the moment, we cannot. I will look into this because I know that we are rolling out some new kind of agency and partner options that is on our roadmap. And just kind of creating a portal specific to agencies. So that is something that I've heard about with the team who is working on that. So I will look into that and I will let you know. But right now, currently, I know that that option is not possible.
You can manually whitelist specific IPs, and we have given out some of those numbers in the past. You can actually just ask our live chat for that, but it's not like a built-in kind of whitelist feature. So if that's something that you're interested in, just reach out to the chat and they'll be able to help you out. But you would have to kind of loop in your IT team for that and whatnot. Yeah, we're getting quite a few questions. Hit me with another one, Stephanie.
All right. Hey, Matthew. So this is coming from our chat. Should you use a different email than your main email for sequences? And this is a question we get a lot.
Mm-hmm. So the answer is yes. You want to be able to diversify any sort of natural time-related decay to your domain. And this also comes into play with volume. So for example, if I have a sequence of 10,000 people and I am sending it all from my joshua@reply.io email address, it is very likely that partway through that sequence, I am going to run into deliverability issues. A singular email address is never designed to send to that kind of capacity in such a short time frame, which is why we have strict limits on your email addresses, 400 being the max. That way, we allow you the ability to add multiple different email addresses with multiple different domains, so you can actually get those numbers out a lot quicker, and you don't have to worry about all of that kind of inherent backlash with the bounces that are inevitably going to happen. Spam, people will manually mark you as spam. That is just the nature of the business. You can't reduce all of it, but you can do your best to kind of cushion the blow. So adding in different domains to your profile here will help kind of diffuse that situation. And at the end of the day, if you do run into actual blacklist issues and things like that, you are using a subdomain. So your main email addresses, your main website, all of the core important tenets of your business are still intact. So if you have the option, absolutely use a subdomain. That being said, you can use your main domain. I just recommend being a little bit more careful with your ramp up process, and being a little bit more cautious with the number of emails you're sending per day. And you really want to clean your list so that you're avoiding mass bounces. If you're kind of being willy-nilly about it and you are using your main domain, you will probably run into issues.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to say. If we do have a lot of customers who they're kind of in that really early stage startup, and maybe they don't have the budget to be purchasing a variety of G Suite accounts, for example, for their outreach. If you are in the position where you don't want to use a different domain or different emails, you can use your own for outreach. However, you want to make sure that you are warming up that email account properly. Gmail as well as Microsoft, they have algorithms in place to detect abnormal sending patterns. So if you go from sending 30 manual emails a day to 200 within a day, there is the chance that your account could be red flagged or potentially marked as potential spam. You also want to keep in mind content. You want to think about, are you putting multiple links in the emails that you're sending? Best practice, keep a 1 to 2. Do you have multiple links in your email signature? You really want to stay on top of your content in terms of anti-spam best practices. And I would also recommend, if you are going to be using your main domain for outreach, that you are not sending high volume. So maybe, again, we talked earlier before about hyper-focused campaigns, maybe having 40 to 50 people at a time that you're reaching out to. So you're not reaching out to 1,000 people and really, meeting those limits every day. But also, really paying attention to your deliverability and maybe running deliverability tests every 2 to 3 months, just to make sure that your account health is optimized. And like Josh said, you haven't landed on any blacklist or spam list. So you can use your own. There's just a lot of kind of work going into it to build up the reputation of that account and also maintaining it as well.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of that, Bob has another question about email bounces that I will loop into this kind of little tangent here. But on the topic of signatures, typically you can get away with adding a few more links. That's why you usually see people add their socials for the company or whatever. If you're doing an individual thing, you'll add the socials and all those links to the signature profile because it's inherently automated. Spam filters let you get away with a little bit more, but that is not to say you should overload it with kind of extraneous detail. Only use the things that you want people to directly interact with. For the number one reason being deliverability. Just last week, or the week before I was on vacation last week, we actually ran into a couple of problems with some clients that were having deliverability issues, and it did come down to like a link to their Facebook logo, which was getting them into updates as opposed to getting into the main inbox. So again, only use links that you actually want people to directly interact with. The other reason you want to kind of be a little bit more restricted or restrained when it comes to those links is you don't want to diversify, or you don't want to dilute your call to action. If you have so many different asks in your sequence and you have no real relationship with these individuals yet, asking them to do like 10 different things is going to result in them doing none of them. Whereas you're going to have a much higher chance or higher probability of them doing what you ask if you only ask them to do one thing. So for example, you want to ask them to hop on a phone call. That's better than saying, hey, do you want to hop on a phone call? Also, here's a PDF and a short video that I've set up. Also, we want to check out my Twitter account. Like, I don't know what to do with that. There's way too much. I'm just going to leave it all because it's a little bit overwhelming. So again, just narrow your focus and use what you believe is going to be most effective, as opposed to just casting this massive net and hoping for the best.
Yeah. And like you can think of that too when you're thinking about multiple links. If I get an email from someone and there's, maybe a link to their website, odds are I'm probably going to take a couple minutes and, maybe, click on that link if the content piqued my interest. But if there's 10 links in that email, I'm not going to take the time to get redirected to all of those links. So think about that too. Like think about, your prospect and how they're going to kind of read that email and interact with everything that you're sending. Like Josh said, you don't want to overwhelm them with too many calls to action or links in that email. So just keep it simple and straight to the point.
The last thing that related to Bob's question was about specifically bounces. If someone does bounce in a sequence, do you have to do something manually to ensure that they don't receive follow-up steps, or is the system going to be doing enough on its own? And the answer is kind of twofold here. So if someone bounces, they will have a status change to bounced. And they do have to have received an email for them to get granted bounce status, which is why when I tried to do it, nothing happened, because none of these emails actually exist and no one's been sent anything. But so if this did say bounced here and I had 3 more steps in the sequence, the system would know not to send out any new emails to that particular individual. So you can rest assured, if you just leave it as it is, that they will not get emailed again. The only instance that they may get new emails is if you accidentally move them to a brand new sequence. All of our statuses, with the exception of opted out, are sequence specific. So even these people down here where it says that I've called them, if I move them to a brand new one, all of that goes away and they are reverted back to active. If you want to ensure that that possibility cannot happen, I recommend every couple of days, just go to your bounce tab on the main people page, and then you'll be able to select all. There's nobody in here, so it's not going to show up, but I will go back to the My section. So you'll just want to,
these are the bounces.
yeah, so you'll just want to go all in list. And even if you've done this process before, you always just want to go all in list. Once they've all been selected, go to the More drop-down menu and just hit the blacklist option here. And that will ensure that even if they end up in another sequence, whether it be on purpose or just unfortunate example of happenstance, blacklist will prevent those emails from going out, even if they're physically in the sequence. So yeah, 99% of the time, bounce is going to be enough, but in the corner cases, blacklisting is just going to cover all the extra bases.
Right. So Josh, we have a question about tasks.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? We just got another question from Bob, and it's kind of related to what we're talking about right now, kind of spam. So let's kind of hop into that and then we'll get to tasks. So if I'm slowly ramping daily sends, i.e. I start at 30 per day and each week I ramp up by 10 per day, how can I measure or evaluate if my messages are being delivered or going to spam?
So usually you'd want to use some type of outside system. There are a number of free options. The one that I use kind of most frequently, and it isn't the most comprehensive, but it's called Mail-Tester, and that will run a basic diagnostic on the health of your domain. So you can just literally go to that website, mail-tester.com. You can send an email from reply directly to the inbox that it sends you, and you'll be able to see how healthy your emails are. While that in itself is not a guarantee that they're all going to go to the main inbox, it's a pretty good indicator that things are going well for you. In the case of reply and using the data here, you really want to look at your deliverables and your opens. So if I go into the sequence and I go to the people page, we have a couple of columns here: delivered, opens, and views. Delivered is going to be the number of messages that you've sent these individuals, pretty obvious. Where opens and views are going to be the number of times that they've actually interacted. If you're sending hundreds of emails a day and you're getting essentially next to no views, that's usually an indicator that, and they haven't bounced, that's usually an indicator that these emails are in fact going to an updates folder or some other type of spam filter. So if you have one or more here and it's essentially blanks 99% of the way through your list, that's usually a good indicator of knowing something's going wrong. Because usually you'd have around a 10% plus out the gate if your list is at all coherent. So yeah, just look for complete blanks, and that's a pretty good way to tell if your emails need some assistance.
And just to hop in, one of the tools that I really like, and I've used this for myself and for my own outreach, is called Glock Apps. And I'll send it out to you guys in the chat. And I'll also include the website that Josh was talking about called Mail-Tester. So with Glock apps, what you can essentially do is you can run tests to see where your emails are landing. And this is based on the reputation and health of your email address and domain. You can see where they're landing. So for example, for anyone who may be using Gmail as their email provider, you will know, okay, the emails are landing in the inbox or they're going to a promotions tab, which odds are if they're going to a promotions tab, they're probably being overlooked. You can see if they're using Microsoft as a provider, if the emails are landing straight in a junk tab or a spam filter. So you can see that. And so the experience that I had, just kind of touching on what Josh said, a couple of years ago, I was sending out emails and there's about 4 or 5 links in the emails. And all of a sudden I noticed that my open rate kind of crashed, my reply rate crashed. So I thought, okay, there's something going on here. And when I ran those tests using Glock apps, I saw that everyone who was using Gmail as their recipient, my emails were landing in their promotions tab. So they weren't even seeing the emails that I was sending. So it is a really good comprehensive tool. And so what I did with that information, I went back, I changed my emails. I reduced the number of links to 2 links in the email. About 3 weeks later, I ran the Glock apps test again. And then I saw that my emails were now being delivered to the primary inbox for Gmail recipients. So Glock apps is a really good one if you want to see where those emails are landing. And like Josh said, Mail Tester is really great just to kind of see the overall health score of your email address, your domain, to see if you've been put any blacklists. It also judges your email content and kind of gives you certain things to look out for, maybe some tips and tricks and things to change just to improve that reputation.
Yeah, exactly. And just speaking of Mail Tester, when you do go on it, there's going to just be a random inbox. It's going to be a long kind of coded email address. You're just going to want to copy that inbox and paste it in the send to email section here when you're sending a test. And that's pretty instant. And then you'll just be able to go back to Mail Tester and have that diagnostic ready for you. And that's located, if you go into any particular step, the one that you want to test, if you click on the little eyeball, you'll get a little preview. There's a send test button down at the bottom. And you can also just use the drop down to send a test this way as well. Alrighty.
All right. So there is a question about tasks. I wanted to ask about the tasks section. What is the best way to manage and make sure all tasks are executed? I understand that from the desktop view, one cannot execute tasks. I also noticed that sometimes the tool jumps over the LinkedIn invitation tasks. I have people at different steps within the same sequence, and the whole task thing is getting a bit messy. I was wondering what is the best way to take care of the tasks?
Okay. So there's a couple ways, and I want to touch on the one point where you said some people get skipped over specific steps. That's actually settings related, or I believe it is if it's not a bug. But the way that it typically works is in a default sequence, if you have a number of supplementary step types, so you can see I have LinkedIn and email here, a task will be generated. And then the contact will be stuck at that particular step until you have marked the task in question as complete. Then they will move to the next step. In your particular instance, what may be happening is in the settings, if you go to calls or tasks handling, you have the option to do so, to set them to manual or automatic. By default, everything is manual. It will work in the way I just described. Until you complete the particular task, they will not move on. If you've changed it to automatic, it doesn't actually matter whether you finish the tasks or not. It will move on to the next step as soon as it possibly can. This is usually best practice for larger scale sequences. If you don't have the time to get to all of your tasks on any given day, but you still want your core emails to be sent out, automatic's probably the best way to do it. To ensure that there's no kind of other delays on top of whatever you have the tasks doing. So I would recommend checking that to see if it's set to automatic. And if it is, you can just set it back to manual. As for the tasks themselves, we are working on an update for the LinkedIn tasks specifically to be able to send all of those out in one shot automatically. Right now, you do have to actually hit the button one at a time. So if you go to your tasks tab in the Chrome extension, the view will be largely similar to this, albeit smaller. But so you'll be able to select the task in question, you will hit launch, and then that will open up another window. In the case of manual email or SMS or the LinkedIn messages, in that window, there will be another button where you can actually send out the message in question. It will give you one final chance to edit the message in any way that you'd like and then send it out. There's unfortunately no way currently to just have them all go out instantly. You do have to kind of open each one at a time. You can mass select them and hit launch, so it opens all of those sub windows at once for you, but you still do have to go through the process of hitting send, 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 send. Though again, that is being worked on and updated in the near future.
Yeah, I actually have my Chrome extension pulled up. If you want me to just to kind of show it really quickly and just what that's going to look like. So yeah, if we kind of go back to the tasks here. So like Josh was saying, when you open up the Chrome extension, you're going to see all of your tasks right here. Obviously mine are overdue. I was just creating these for testing purposes before. So you will see the tasks right here. So there's a couple things that you can do. You can select all of them and launch all the tasks, or you can kind of hop into each one right here. And so you'll be able to scroll through these semi-automated notifications. So for example, Karen right here, I can complete this task. I mean, for Karen right here, I don't have her LinkedIn URL, so we can kind of look for her LinkedIn profile. Once we have their URL, we can go and complete that task, and then we can move on to the next task right here. So we have this contact right here, who is going to be a message, and all those tasks are going to be here. So like we said, with that semi-automation with tasks, we always recommend using the Chrome extension in tandem with the desktop version of Reply. It's just LinkedIn, whatever the task may be, even if it's, calls or anything like that, using it in tandem is going to be the best way to make sure that those tasks are executed. You can filter for a specific task based on what type of task it is. So maybe you can filter for all LinkedIn tasks. You can even filter for, when that task was created. So, anything that was created a week ago or today and moving forward. You can even filter based on a specific sequence. So any tasks that are due for a sequence. So there are a lot of options within the Chrome extension, and I would recommend using it in tandem.
And just while you're on the screen here, if you want to actually just open that up for another second. So you can see down there, it says William, the task is there, and it says look for LinkedIn. In this case, the URL for William is not actually in the profile. So if you click on that button, it's just going to open up LinkedIn tab and try to run a search for this individual. It would say send LinkedIn request if the URL was actually in the profile within Reply, and would instantly send that out. So it kind of helps you, again, with the lead generation aspect, as well as pushing those messages. And then your follow-up question here on automated tasks, would this also work even if the email is to be sent out manually? Yeah, it's kind of an all or nothing option. It doesn't finish the task for you. It just doesn't wait for the next step to initiate while the other one has yet to be completed. So you can, if you want everything to be manually done, I don't recommend setting your task options to automatic, just because you do want that kind of hands-on approach. But yeah, if you do have manual LinkedIn steps, SMS, whatever the case is, and you set those supplementary tasks to automatic, it won't complete them, but it will filter through to your automated steps that are in the sequence. We got another classic from Bob here. Thank you for all of your questions today. Please differentiate opens from views. That is a question that we get all the time.
All the time.
Literally all the time. It is a great question. So if I go back to sequences, sorry. And we will go to hello, everyone. We will go to people. All right. So the way that it operates is I have 3 steps in the hello, everyone sequence. Opens are tied to the number of steps that I have. So if I send one email out, I can get a maximum of 1 open. With 3 steps, I can only ever have at most 3 opens. It's going to be 1 open per step. Views is the much more actionable item. That is going to be the total number of times that these contacts have come back to that particular set of emails. So whereas you can only ever have a maximum of 3 opens here, you can have hundreds of views. And that does take into account any forwarded opens. So if they're kind of circulating the email through their kind of company, getting more eyeballs on it, and they are also clicking on it, that will also proc views, but it will not proc opens.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be, I was going to ask about that. So funny story, I had a customer once and we were going through his campaign and we noticed that for one of the steps, there was 82 views. And so we're thinking, okay, what are the odds that this person opened that one email 82 times? And so kind of looking at the email, was a very witty email. I thought it was hilarious. So he decided to, get in touch with that prospect and just say, hey, what did you think of my email? And it turns out that this prospect thought that the email was so funny, he actually sent it to everyone in his office.
Yeah.
So that's where the 82 views came from.
And on a less kind of humorous note, you can actually accidentally proc your own views. It's not easy to do, but if you do go into your own sent folder and start opening up the emails that you've sent out through reply, that does also count as a view. Because we are operating with a pixel-based analytics system, if you interact with it yourself, it will also kind of trigger. But you do have to kind of go out of your way to get that to happen. So it's not going to be very common, but it can happen. And is there any way to differentiate real from fake or robotic opens and clicks? Inherently, no, but there is a way to kind of tell. If you're only getting kind of 1 open, 1 view, and no other interaction, that can potentially be a bot, especially if you do have a lot of links in your sequences. Spam filters do kind of run through checks of all of the content that comes in and out, especially with higher security domains. But it only happens once. They're not constantly rechecking the same emails. So if you have multiple views, you can rest assured that that's probably an actual person. But if it's just one, there is the possibility that it was automated. So yeah, just look for kind of multi-touches and you're pretty safe in that regard. Amanda's had a question in here for a while, and I think we've put it off because we're not exactly sure what it refers to. She asked, how can you incorporate a NextWeaver personalized feature into a reply? I'm assuming that's some type of third-party system where it can allow kind of customized widgets or something like that. To my knowledge, the answer is simply no, but that is kind of on the more technical side, so maybe a question for IT.
You know what? I was actually, while we were kind of going through some of these other questions in the background, I was checking on Zapier, thinking that maybe there was an option with Zapier, since we do connect to 2,000 different applications via Zapier, but there's no option for NextWeaver there as well. So I was looking into it, seeing what I could find, but it's definitely something that we could talk to our product team about. And if we can get more information, we can definitely send it over to you, Amanda.
Yeah, she's saying I got that one from one of the reply blogs. Was that a blog related to a feature that we have, or was it kind of, we do have some articles out there that are kind of just talking up other partners or other platforms that we think are doing cool things. It's not something that I'm currently aware of. Maybe it's something that the devs are looking into building. If you can send me an email, my email is joshua@reply.io, just kind of linking to that. I'd love to look into it and maybe follow up with you there. Thanks. We've got 2 more here. Are triggers the way in which I need to set up conditional activities or move people to a list or sequence? The answer is yes and no. You can do so manually if you need to move people around. So you can click on individuals, whether it be in a sequence or on the main people page, and you can move them to whatever target location. It will literally remove them from one sequence and place them into a new one. So if you, again, you do want that hands-on approach, you want to know exactly where things are going and do it yourself, this is probably the best way to do it. You cannot do it through a CSV import. That will not work. When it says updated, it only refers to the fields within their profile. It does not move them from one sequence to another. The triggers are a way to kind of set this up based on some of our filters to automatically move them from one location to another. So if you do have kind of dedicated follow-up sequences, you can set up a trigger, for example, views 3 or more times, then move them to follow-up sequence A. That is something that you can do, and you can find those options in settings, triggers. There are many options, and we've actually gone through the majority of these in other calls. I don't think we're gonna have enough time to go too in depth on it today. But yeah, the options are there, or you can just do it manually. Personally, I like doing it manually because I like knowing exactly where things are going. And if there's a mistake, I know kind of when it happened, as opposed to triggers. But yeah, if you're working in larger volumes and have multiple team members, this is probably a much more seamless way and faster way to get that done.
Also, Amanda, I just sent you privately Josh's email address. So you should have gotten his email address. So yeah, if you want to email Josh about NextWeaver, we can definitely look into it for you. There's one more question. It's not really a question. Just the ability to use color text would be nice.
There is a way to do that, and I understand it's not the best way, but there is an option, and I will show you guys how to do that. I hope it's enabled on this test account. We'll find out. It is. So when you're in the editor, you can actually use the source code option. And if you do not have this inherently in your accounts, you can just ask for it to be enabled in the live chat. They will be able to do that for you right away. You can actually mess around with the code here. So similar to how we have these options for brackets, there is HTML code for changing font size, font itself, and colors. So you can do a quick Google search for the HTML code for the particular color that you want, and you can kind of wrap whatever text you want in those codes, and it will change color for you. So yeah, definitely not ideal. It's something that many people have asked for, and it is something that we want to look into, but we're also doing a ton of other cool things. So it's not the #1 thing on our list, but hopefully we will get to it one day.
It's been something that Josh and I have both been here for 5 years. It's, the ability to either, change the color of the font or, even the font itself. This is something that we've heard a lot from a lot of our customers over the time that Josh and I have been here. And we will continue to pass that on to our dev team, just like we will continue to pass on the color text requests to our dev team. Because I know for me, like as soon as someone says to me HTML, I'm not listening anymore. Because it sounds too difficult. So, an easy way to kind of change font or color would definitely be ideal. So yeah, we'll continue to pass it on to our dev team. And keep an eye out for emails from our marketing team when they are announcing, new releases or updates, because every time we have a new update, we do let all of our customers know. So.
And just to kind of piggyback off of that, the reason why it's not in the platform already is because the more you do alter the text, and so even if you didn't have a drop down here that allowed you to change font styles and change colors, you are still manipulating the HTML code. It's just not something that you're actively aware that you're doing. And the more that you do tinker around with that stuff, you are very, very slightly impacting your deliverability score, which is why most marketing emails in general will end up in an updates or something like that. It's just because they're so filled with images and they're manipulated to be a lot flashier. It just kind of happens. So there is a reason why the team has been skeptical to do it, but it's so commonly asked for. I'm sure it'll happen at some point.
Okay, we have another question. This one's about Pipedrive. Is it difficult to integrate the Pipedrive CRM? I'm not a real technical person, and I just want a general sense of the landmines I may encounter.
Integrating it is rather simple. You just go to the integrations page, you hit the connect option, and a little pop-up will show up that will ask you to log into your Pipedrive account like you would normally. You do need an API key, which can be found in your Pipedrive settings. But other than that, it's pretty seamless as far as the actual setup. And then once you're in the actual Pipedrive integration, I can bring up the quick documents here. It's also not all that difficult. It's essentially just a series of toggles that you can kind of mess around with to perform some basic functions. You want to pull in contacts from Pipedrive, you can map the specific fields that you want to be pulled in along with them. And then you also have the ability to move them directly into sequences. But it's super quick to get set up. Oh, did I hit back? What happened?
Yeah, you did.
I literally didn't even touch my mouse that time and it changed back. There's a ghost in the machine.
There is.
But yeah, super simple to set up, and then you literally just have 3 options here to toggle on or off. So it's very lightweight, very easy to use. I don't foresee any issues there. But if you do, we have this document here. You can just again hit that support option and then search Pipedrive. This will give you the rundown of how to get that all set up.
Yeah. And if you're more of a visual person like I am, we do have on Reply's YouTube channel, which is where all of these sessions are. There are also really quick videos that are maybe 2 to 3 minutes each that walk through all of our native integrations, for example. So there is a Pipedrive video there. It's probably 3 minutes long. So feel free to take a look there as well. Also, talking about Pipedrive, our product team is working on updating our Pipedrive integration. So like Josh was saying, right now, our Pipedrive integration, as well as the Copper integration that you're seeing right now on the screen, it is a one-way integration, meaning you can pull data in from your CRM into Reply, but you can't pull data from Reply into your CRM. So one of the updates that is on the roadmap and kind of coming on the pipeline is an update to the Pipedrive integration where it will be a two-way native integration. So that is coming. But yeah, for now, it is a bit limited. You do have 3 options, but yeah, definitely check out our YouTube channel for a quick video and really how to optimize that setup for yourself.
And the update that Stephanie is alluding to is going to transition this kind of version of Pipedrive with the 3 toggles to a more nuanced approach. It's a little bit more nuanced than this, but this is generally what it's going to look like. You'll be able to toggle the direction that the sync step is approaching. You'll be able to interact with it, mess around with the mappings within each individual step, and then even add filter rules to hone in on particular subgroups of contacts and things like that. So in essence, it's going to get more complex, but also more useful with the update. Currently, very, very straightforward.
All right. Okay, we have another question. This is about sequence stats. Sometimes it's hard or unclear to reconcile the number included in a sequence and a stat report. Can you show stats and help understand how that relates to the total sending population?
That's a little bit harder to display because these test accounts don't actually have anything in them.
I can pull up mine, Josh.
Yeah.
I think I still have my account open in the background.
If you can.
I do. So let me share my screen with you, and then you can tell me where to navigate.
So I think what Bob is referring to here, let's go to the main sequences page first. So I believe Bob is saying it's hard to reconcile the number of people included in the sequence, which is, you see the column people there, 584 at onboarding North America, 204 for January 21. That is the number of people in the sequence at this very moment. We don't know how many of those people are active, how many of those are finished. That can be found in a different section. But that's the number of people physically in the sequence at this time. The delivered number on the far right is the total number of individual emails that have gone out from the sequence. So 3,022 messages have been sent across the 584 people in the sequence. And then you can see the progress bar there. It's almost completely full. Almost the entire list is finished, with a few exceptions. And those outliers can be the result of a number of things. Usually they're blacklisted, or they bounced, or they've opted out from the previous sequence. Something is preventing them from ever actually being marked as done. But so that's kind of the breakdown there. And then if you click into the sequence itself and go to the stats, here it shows how many emails have gone out in the last 7 days. So if you see that nothing is showing up initially, that's just because maybe the sequence is completed, it's currently paused, whatever the case is. There's a number of different options there. If you set the sequence to all time, you will get a better understanding of how many people have been sent, when those emails have been sent, and how they've interacted with your individual emails. Here, this is where it can get a little bit confusing. So we said that there were 584 or something to that effect in the sequence currently, but it says there are 574 people here, and 550 of those have been contacted. These numbers exclude blacklisted people, people that have opted out. There are statuses that can prevent them from showing up in these particular categories. For a full breakdown and the actual formulas of each of these different stats, you can also go to the support tab on that black bar and type in analytics, and it will actually show you the breakdown. There is an article on there giving you the specifics of how we have reached these numbers. But to summarize, these numbers are excluding specific things. For example, like you'll have open rates, or your deliverability rate will only count people that have actually received the message and did not bounce. They did not opt out, things like that. So your number is inherently going to be lower than your total, because not all of those were, in quotes, delivered. So it can be a little bit kind of confusing at first glance, because the numbers don't inherently match up, but it's because they're excluding things that aren't particularly necessary to that individual stat. Yeah, anytime, Bob. Thank you for asking them. It is always a pleasure.
So I think we have time for a couple more questions. So actually, we have one more in the chat. So give me 1 second. Is there an automatic opt-out link on the emails that come from reply?
And there is, if you want there to be. Yes. So if you go to settings at the very top and you click into email accounts, you'll have to do this for each of the individual addresses that you have set up. But once you click inside, you can go down to opt-out text. And by default, everyone is set to unsubscribe via plain text, which means if someone wants to opt out, they need to actually respond to you. And by default, regardless of the context, if they respond, they can even send you an email with just a subject line and no actual body. They will be marked as finished/replied, which means they will not receive follow-up emails from that particular sequence. Very similar to the bounced conversation that we had earlier. If they go a little bit further and say something specific along the lines of stop emailing me, unsubscribe, remove me from your list, they will get the opted out status, which is global. They will never receive another email from your reply account for as long as they have that status. And the only way to remove it is to go in and manually do so from that individual. If you don't want the automatic plain text version of the system, you can choose the opt-out link. So simply hitting this toggle will default to an opt-out link here. You can change the text itself to say whatever you'd like. The functionality will remain intact. The only thing you need to keep is this kind of click here thing. Yeah, so the link is there if you want to. We don't have it on by default because just looping back to the whole deliverability conversation we've been having. Anything that is external to plain text, so images, attachments, HTML, it will slightly impact your deliverability score. And adding in an opt-out link to a new user who's never sent mass email before can be just one aspect that they're not aware of, and we don't want to set them off on the wrong foot, so to speak. But the option.
And I'm a fan of the plain text option. And the reason I'm a fan of the plain text option is because, the whole point of the platform is to send personal emails. Like, you want your prospects to think that you sat there and you type that email just for them, and it's going to give them those warm, fuzzy feelings. And then they scroll down and they see an unsubscribe link and they're like, mailing list, automation. It just takes away from that personalization. So I'm a fan of the plain text option. That's what I recommend to all the customers I talk to. That's what I have on my account. So yeah. And also, I want to apologize for my dog.
I haven't heard your dog a single time.
He just ran to the window and I wasn't muted. And so Josh and I have been doing these live sessions since I think March. And every time I think, okay, should I take a chance and leave him, to hang out with me? Because sometimes he barks at random things out the window, like the mailman or a leaf blowing by. And he's been good. Every single time I take a chance, he's been good. And then today was the first time I was like, oh no. So if you guys heard him, I'm a German Shepherd. And sometimes he likes to hear his own voice, basically.
Well, he was quiet enough for me. Maybe I was just talking too much.
Okay. And yes, Amanda, dogs are great, even if they're a bit loud sometimes.
That's it. Well, yeah, I think we're coming up to the end of our time here. We had a small but mighty crew. Thank you guys for asking so many questions. It's really great to see such interaction. We host these relatively regularly, so if there are any other questions that you guys have, feel free to pop by one of our later streams, and we'll be sure to get to you. And yeah. With that, if there's anything else for the last second, feel free to get it in. Otherwise, we will give you guys the rest of your day back.